And it's LH that stimulates ovulation, that stimulates the oocyte to come out. So when LH peaks, it stimulates, it causes the oocyte to burst. And LH does that, you ready for it? By inducing COX-2. Remember COX-2, cyclooxygenase? And that same prostaglandin, probably would make you memorize something that you want to use it over and over again. That same prostaglandin causes a contraction of the follicle and the egg pops out. Some women can tell you, like, oops, it just ovulated. Some women can actually feel it when they ovulate. So when LH peaks, the follicle that has the most LH receptor, that's most sensitive to LH, responds by making COX-2 and EGF, or prostaglandin F2 alpha, or whatever it was, and that causes a contraction that pops the egg out. It gets sucked down the fallopian tube. Then you get negative feedback. Oops. It's going to be hard to read. So E2 feeds back on GnRH. And get this, E2 feeds back on the LH receptor, but the on LH, but LH has no ERE. So E2 feeds back on LH through its receptor, ER alpha, but the DNA binding portion is not required. I just learned that today too, contemplate that. E2 feeds back on GnRH through the classic mechanism that I taught you, the ERE and all that. It feeds back on FSH beta through the classic mechanism I told you about. But it feeds back on LH, but the LH gene has no ERE, and the ERE, the DNA binding portion of the estrogen receptor, is not required for negative feedback on LH. In the brain, there's also another hormone. You guys aren't going to like this part. There's another hormone called activin. Activin specific, and actually it's related to inhibin. Inhibin's a heterodimer. It's a protein. Activin is a homodimer of two portions of inhibin. But it stimulates. It's trying to undo what inhibin does. This is why we did men first. This is why we. But then in the brain, I don't like this stuff. I just report it. There's another hormone called follistatin that actually blocks activin. So you got GnRH stimulating LH and FSH. You got E2 feeding negatively back on GnRH and LH and FSH. You got inhibin feeding back on FSH. But then you got activin trying to induce FSH with follistatin binding to activin and blocking what it does. And then, you guys don't seem to be enjoying this, but it's fine. It turns out that E2 also inhibits activin. And that's the whole story. Yeah, what's up and back? Hi.
So you said E2 actually stimulates LH receptor in the ovary?
E2 actually stimulates LH receptor, correct.
But it's inhibiting LH production.
Say again?
But it inhibits LH production in the...
After ovulation, the negative feedback returns.
Okay.
Or the positive feedback goes away, but certainly the negative feedback returns because after ovulation, I'm sorry, I forgot to bring all my colored chalks today. So I got to do squigglies. After ovulation, LH LH goes down, FSH goes down, E2 goes down. Yeah. So activin is stimulating FSH, the arrow. So activin is stimulating FSH, it's local in the brain. Follistatin is being produced locally in the brain and binds to activin to block it. Yeah?
In the diagram there, do you mean that E2 inhibits inhibin or activin?
E2 inhibits activin.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going around the inhibin. Yeah.
So inhibin and activin are active at the same time, just one eat out the other?
One's being produced in the brain.
Okay.
So there's a inhibin can be like alpha BA or alpha BB, and activin is I believe an alpha homodimer. So it's made of some of the same peptide portions as inhibin. But it's in the brain, it's inducing FSH, and follistatin, an unrelated peptide, has the job of blocking activin, in addition to estrogen feeding back on activin, or inhibiting activin. Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you call it feedback. Yeah. Are you sharing? Yeah, I have no idea what you look like. I just know where you sit. I'm blind as bad. Yeah.
What induces follistatin?
I don't know what controls follistatin. No idea. Or activin. Inhibin is controlled by the number of granulosa cells. So inhibin's increasing. We're not going to put that on the chart. But inhibin's increasing because all the follicles are increasing. The more granulosa cells you have. And the production of inhibin by the granulosa cells is an inherent property of that cell. So you're getting more and more inhibin because you have more and more cells, not because, I'm just making sure I didn't draw it that way, and that's why I don't have FSH stimulating inhibin. So FSH isn't making inhibin go up. FSH is simply increasing the cells that inherently make inhibin.
Is the mechanism at all for how like a signal for follistatin to inhibit activin?
That I don't know the answer to. Or why you even have all this redundancy that you're blocking something that blocks something that's all I can tell you. As far as I know right now. Yeah.
Can you repeat again how estrogen inhibits
How estrogen does what?
LH?
Estrogen inhibits LH, but it apparently is not due to classical mechanism of the ERV. It's due to classical receptor. So these guys did a study where they generated a receptor where they cut off the DNA binding portion of ER alpha, and they transfected that into a rodent, and they showed that you still get negative feedback to LH, and the promoter for LH doesn't have an ERV. So it's through the classical receptor, but it is not through it binding and interacting with DNA. No, FSH is through classical mechanism, and GnRH is through classical mechanism. Okay. This is called the follicular phase. The next phase is predominated by a new axis. Well, not new axis, but newly functional. Where progesterone predominates. This follicle that exploded is called a Graafian follicle. I should say exploded. That ovulated. And after that, remember, only the egg leaves the ovary. People also get confused about this. Only the oocyte, which, did I tell you where the word oocyte comes from? It used to be ovocyte, or cell of the ovary. Like somehow the V got left out. Only, well, the oocyte surrounded by something called the zona pellucida. I don't care if you know that. It leaves behind a mixture where the thecal cells invade the granulosa. It leaves behind something called the corpus luteum. Corpus is body, luteum means yellow. So it leaves behind a yellow body, because I guess they're yellow. Can I go? And the corpus luteum is maintained by low levels of LH. The corpus luteum is very sensitive to LH. In part, well, in large part, because estrogen stimulates the progesterone receptor. So that follicle that had the most estrogen, that had the most LH receptor, now has lots of progesterone receptor. So the corpus luteum maintains those progesterone levels. Yeah. I'll repeat that, and your question? Oh, okay. All right. So the first part of the cycle, the follicular phase, the first 14 days, this is happening. Well, without the negative feedback. FSH and LH are increasing. Estrogen levels are increasing. And then on day 14, the follicle that grew the fastest would produce the most inhibin, which reduced the FSH so the other follicles couldn't grow. Also the follicle with the most LH receptor, presumably. You know, I don't know how they know that. Because how would you study that? You'd have to know which follicle is going to win. And then you pull it out to study it, but now it's no longer there. So I have no idea how they know that. But presumably get a follicle that's the most responsive to estrogen, that has the most estrogen receptor, the most LH receptor, ovulates. The LH stimulates COX-2, the prostaglandin causes the follicle to contract, the oocyte comes out. Then you get a corpus luteum. The thecal cells, which are outside the follicle, interstitial, means between the tissues. The thecal cells invade the follicle, and now you have a mixture of LH-sensitive thecal cells and granulosa cells. And it doesn't quite look like a pizza, there's more structure to it. But there's definitely an invasion. Once the follicle's open, those thecal cells can move in. LH then primarily supports the corpus luteum. I'm going to call it CL, corpus luteum. And the progesterone does a couple things on the molecular level. One is it induces its own receptor. So there's a PRE in the progesterone receptor promoter. One is it induces its own receptor. But two, it's going to be really important in pregnancy, it actually downregulates the estrogen receptor. Who want to give me one reason why you want to do that? What's one reason why you want to do that? There you go. So if you continue to have this estrogen-sensitive endometrium, your uterus will just continue to grow. And in fact, there are disorders, there's conditions that we'll talk about where you grow actually endometrial tissue even outside of your uterus. So you don't want the estrogen to continue. So once the uterine lining is built up, because you're expecting to have a baby implant there, Once the uterine lining is built up, you want it to stop. So one, estrogen's gone down, you have lower estrogen. But equally important, progesterone is blocking the transcription. It's down-regulating the estrogen receptor and up-regulating its own. Remember, estrogen up-regulates both its own receptor and progesterone. And you can imagine why. I mean, think about it. It makes sense, right? You're trying to prepare, your uterus is trying to prepare, so that estrogen's not only preparing your uterus to grow, it's preparing it for the progesterone, but now you need to knock the estrogen out. Yeah?
So, if the estrogen receptor was not downregulated, would that mean that since E2 induces the LH receptor, the corpus luteum would be degraded? If the estrogen were to continue? Because you need that low level of LH to maintain the corpus luteum?
Say that again, let me think about what you just asked.
Okay, so
That's okay.
if estrogen induces the LH receptor, and
Mhm.
the low levels of LH are supporting the corpus luteum, if there was an increase of estrogen, like if that mechanism of progesterone downregulating the estrogen receptor didn't exist, would that mean that the corpus luteum would degrade?
I think it would be just the opposite because the E2 supports the LH receptor. So you'd have more sensitivity to the LH.
And you need low levels of LH.
Well, it's not that you need low levels, but they're not pre-ovulatory levels. It's not that they need to be low. And in fact, there's going to be a big increase in the LH-like molecule if you get pregnant. HCG, huge amounts. So much that it somehow comes out in your urine. I don't know.
What was preventing the LH from inducing progesterone before ovulation?
I don't know the answer to that. So when the follicles are in that arrangement, when LH induces testosterone and it switches over, when they after they form the corpus luteum, they simply must express different enzymes. So same path, the same way that estrogen induces different genes in the mammary gland versus the uterus. Once they're in that formation, they're still responding to LH, but some of the transcription factors and things that LH stimulates must change. So they don't express the enzyme. There's still some estrogen, it's not zero, but it's primarily predominated by progesterone. Yes?
If your estrogen receptors were like still not downregulated, would you run the risk of new follicles developing?
No, because what happens? Sorry, I didn't say it like that because I had to think.
Okay.
So what happens is the progesterone has such a strong negative feedback that you don't go into another cycle unless you're kangaroo. So kangaroos can actually get pregnant when they're pregnant because they don't actually have this kind of negative feedback. So on the molecular level, progesterone is working through its classical receptor, and it's regulating other things too. But really important is it's regulating its own receptor. It's regulating the estrogen receptor negatively, and it's doing this negative feedback effect so that you don't go through another cycle and ovulate again. So you would not get that for if you do not, you actually have that oocyte, once it pops out, you're actually, I shouldn't say this, because it's not as ridiculous as it might sound. You're actually only fertile for 1 day a month. That oocyte has like 24 hours when it can actually be fertilized. And it's fertilized, it will meet the sperm, and I'm going to let you figure out how the sperm gets there. We're not going to do that part. But it's fertilized in the fallopian tube, and then after 4 or 5 days, we'll talk about next week, wanders down and finds its place in the uterus, unless something goes wrong. If it doesn't, the corpus luteum has a finite life in the absence of pregnancy. And if it doesn't, the corpus luteum becomes a corpus albicans. Or a white body. And it stops responding. The progesterone then declines, and as a result of progesterone declining, as does the lining of the endometrium, the lining of the uterus. Yeah, I will. Unless you get pregnant, which we'll do a week from now. Unless you get pregnant, the corpus luteum has a finite life. And the corpus luteum will eventually die. Progesterone levels go down. Corpus luteum forms the corpus albicans. In the absence of progesterone, I don't know what word to use. I've gotten in trouble for this before too. You shed or slough. Somehow they're equally offensive words to people, but I don't know what other word to use. But you shed or slough the lining of your uterus, your endometrium. In the absence of progesterone, the endometrial tissue declines and you get your menstrual period. This endometrium leaving, exiting, is in part, who knows, you know, I remember when I first started teaching this class, finally a woman asked me like, oh, why do you get menstrual cramps? And I realized in every book where you read the human reproductive cycle, they talk about everything except probably like the 4 or 5 most important days if you're a female. Like, have you ever read in a book what hormones involved in actually getting your period? They skip it. Anyway, it turns out that the hormones that involved are prostaglandins again. Into the luteal phase. And it's those prostaglandins that cause the contractions and cramping of the uterus that help the endometrial tissue to exit. I'm going to go with exit. So that's why things like aspirin or Tylenol help with menstrual cramps, because again, remember they block those cyclooxygenases. They stop you from making so much of the enzyme that produces the prostaglandins. Yeah?
Is there anything that like tells your body to start producing prostaglandins, or like?
I think it's just a decline in progesterone. Because progesterone actually, one of the things that progesterone does is decreases your sensitivity to both oxytocin and prostaglandins. Because when you actually get pregnant, you don't want your uterus to be contracting and stuff. So I think it's simply the decline in progesterone that allows that to happen. What other stuff? Oh, we got 10 minutes. Yeah.
The thickening of the uterine lining is directly as a response to which hormones?
Estrogen, primarily. So the follicular phase, it's the estradiol that's causing the growth and the division of the cells that make up the uterine lining. But then after that, because remember also that estrogen is inducing progesterone receptor. And so after you ovulate, the progesterone is maintaining what the estrogen did, what the estradiol did. So they sort of work together that way. And as you'll see, when we get pregnant, there's another LH-like molecule called HCG that comes from the developing conceptus that rescues the corpus luteum for another 3 months. And then the placenta is going to take over. And probably one of the most difficult lectures I have to give, but one of my favorites for long. Yeah?
So you said aspirin blocks prostaglandins?
It blocks prostaglandin synthesis. So that's why when you have a hangover and it's like your blood vessels are constricted in your head, that's how aspirin or Tylenol works. And so it's the same thing here. Those same enzymes produce prostaglandins that cause the menstrual cramping to try to help get rid of that tissue. So when you block with aspirin or Tylenol, I think they block different enzymes, different parts of the pathways, but they both work in the same way. It reduces prostaglandin production.
So then if you take aspirin, are you not, so then it's not going to like...
No, it's not 100%. Like, it doesn't completely block prostaglandin. That would probably be one thing. Yeah.
So in the molecular phase, estrogen causes the endometrium to grow, right?
Yep.
And then during the luteal phase, is it the progesterone maintains it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it will, so progesterone literally means progestational hormone, and it will throughout the pregnancy. It is the hormone that will prevent the uterine lining from shedding and a number of other stuff that we'll talk about a week from now. But I think on Thursday we're going to be on contraception. What else?
So if you take aspirin, does it increase the luteal phase if it blocks your prostaglandin?
No, so the question is, it doesn't increase the luteal phase. I think it just relieves the cramping that some people experience. No, but it won't extend because the corpus luteum is dead. So we can't rescue the corpus luteum.
So if you get pregnant, will you not see that drop off in progesterone? Will
Correct.
Kind of just.
Correct. When you get pregnant, the conceptus very early on, I like to use the word, starts hijacking mom's hormones. For some reason people don't like it. But very early on, it makes a hormone that looks like LH, called HCG, that maintains the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum in placental mammals, like ourselves, will maintain the pregnancy for another 3 months. And then the placenta takes over. You probably don't care about this, but if you're a kangaroo, if you're not a true placental mammal, at the end of the corpus luteum, then you just give birth to this premature baby. But we have a placenta that takes over. All right, other stuff? Yep.
Are prostaglandins right towards the
Yes, the uterine cramping is because of the prostaglandin.
Why is there so much variability in that? What would be the advantage?
Probably sensitivity too. Like me, I never get hungover, for example. So it's probably sensitivity to prostaglandins, how much you produce. There's also incredible sensitivity to, what is the word now? Not PMS, but there's a severe form, like 2% of people have, where they get anxiety and depression and are like non-functional for several days. So there are people who are, some of it people think, for example, PMS is withdrawal from progesterone. Very similar to what some women experience, like when they experience, my brain's dead today. Postpartum depression, yeah. So some women have symptoms almost just like that every month with a decline in progesterone. It has to do with your sensitivity to progesterone or interactions between how much estrogen you have and how much progesterone. It's probably not as well studied as it should be. What else? We're done with the menstrual cycle. I want to move on. We probably have like 5 minutes. Any other questions?
So when the progesterone goes down, that's what allows GnRH to start back up again?
Yeah, and then you enter another cycle. So the progesterone goes down, and then depending on which you think there's more data for, you go into positive feedback follicular phase with E2 stimulating LH and FSH, or you have to get that far again before your negative feedback returns. All right. Yep.
Or when does inhibin stop inhibiting FSH?
Well, once you ovulate, there are no more follicles growing, so there's no more inhibin, right? Because the inhibin's all coming, remember, it's an inherent property of the granulosa cell, so the whole time the follicles growing, you're making more and more inhibin. Then once you don't have any more follicles growing, then you're done. But there's no more inhibin. I will have office hours 8:30 to 9:30. If you need them at a different time, let me know. But let me know tonight, because I live a long way away, it takes me a long way to get here. So I have to know way ahead of time. All right, we're good? Thank you. See you next time.